So kind of maybe give me a little dry run for tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow's going to be great. We're going to have a lot
I
more
hope
people
so, because
tomorrow.
Marge is going to be there. Marge
Yeah.
ain't able to come here because she got a grandkids visiting.
Does she?
But she's... Oh, wait, we got a straggler. Oh, two.
Wait a couple minutes.
I've already started. We're good.
Okay, is this camera the live stream? Take a look here.
That's the camera. And if you look in the computer, you can see down there what's going to the world.
I'm just going to be a tiny little thing.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome tonight, a special edition of Let's Talk Oconee SC. Tonight, we are having a conversation with Understanding Autism, and to introduce what we're doing tonight for the folks that are watching, I want to bring our show host on, Kathy Littleton. Kathy, tell us a little bit about what we're going to experience tonight.
We're going to have Thomas McKean here, and he is going to give a presentation about understanding autism. We just want to have everybody out and give a presentation for families like mine, and hopefully give a chance for people to meet and connect and just kind of get out and talk about the things that they experience and, just get together and socialize a little bit.
One thing about it, too, we want to inform our folks that there is a website or a Facebook page that's been created. If you have a special needs child, if you have a special need adult, there is a support avenue now, and we're working hard to develop and continue for folks to be able to join our Facebook page. I think it's Special Needs Oconee. What was the name of it again, Kathy?
It's Special Needs Families of Oconee, right. SC.
Just wanted to make sure, because my mind is 400 right now. Yes. We came down to the wire. We want to thank St. Luke United Methodist Church in Walhalla for allowing us to host this event here. So the next voice you hear will be Mr. Thomas himself. And matter of fact, he is already walking up to the front of the church here, and we're going to go ahead and turn it over to him. And again, thank you for joining us this evening here on Let's Talk Oconee. Tomorrow night, our regular show will be back at 7 p.m. We'll be back. Mr. Thomas, it's all yours. Take it away.
Hang on. Okay, you guys didn't hear that introduction for the benefit of our web people. I am this guy, Thomas. I'm the author of these two books. Soon will come to light, light on the horizon. Just wanted to talk to you a little bit this evening about understanding autism. Seems like there's a lot of people don't quite understand it. People in this room, I think you probably do. So here's what I want to do tonight. This is what I got planned. I ran this by Kathy. She said it sounded like it was a good idea. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about understanding autism, probably tell you what you already know, and then get into a little bit of a conversation, see if we can go a little bit deeper. So to start, a little bit about me, and this doesn't have 65 in it. I was born in 65, and kind of bounced around in special ed classes. Nobody knew what was going on with me. It was a different time. It was many years ago before people really had any idea what autism was. And diagnosed at age 14 in 79, and even as late as then, what they were doing was they were putting you into the institution. And this is kind of what happened to me. I was in the institution for about 3 years or so. Got out and worked for Medicare for a while. I was telling Kathy about this earlier. Was it Marge? I was processing Medicare claims for Ohio and West Virginia. And in 1991, after a engagement kind of fell apart, I still have the ring, I went back to that facility there, see if I can, and asked them for some records, and that's how I learned of the diagnosis 12 years after they made it. Now, my parents told me, my mother told me that they were never told about it. Apparently, back then, they were a little afraid of the A word, so they just said I was a little developmentally delayed. I got no reason not to believe her. And in early '92, looking for answers, I started traveling to local autism support groups, attending their meetings and things like that. And then from 92 to 94, and again from 97 to 2000, that's 2 non-consecutive terms, a la Grover Cleveland. I served on the National Autism Society of America Board of Directors. And during that time, as you can see, I traveled extensively around the US. I did consulting with families and schools, basically putting kids and families' lives back together, something that I eventually got a little good at doing. And then from 2010 to the present, I've kind of tried to update that, get into the 21st century. The webcast, I guess, is part of that. I've been doing social casting, writing. I've been published in the Autism Digest and Autism Parenting Magazine and Patreon and the blog over there on the National Council of Severe Autism and a few other things. Here's some other things that I've done, just to give you a better idea of, why should you listen to me? And I'm not even sure this is enough. I was one of the 4 original advocates, along with Temple Grandin, Sean Barron, and Donna Williams. The 4 of us kind of redefined autism in the 90s and made it a little more accurate and started that process of understanding what it is. The 2 books, I showed you those. The first one soon will come to light. Won a Literary Achievement Award, got me onto Oprah and NPR. Spoke to the Senate and Congress about funding and awareness. I attended the Senate vaccine hearings in 2001, and I spoke on the Mall in DC to a few thousand people in 2001 as well. That was kind of cool. So this is over the course of 30 some years. This didn't happen all at once. It's just that I found myself being pulled in deeper and deeper into this cause, and I saw that it was making a difference, and I felt like I was actually accomplishing something with my life, so I just kind of ran with it. I put this here because I like the comics. I got a thing for the comics. Every night I read the comics. I told Kathy I would tell you the story. I'll do that after this. The story. The Shadow, I put that up there along with the comics. I also kind of like those old radio dramas from the 30s and 40s. I kind of like them better than current TV. I think the plots are better, and they kind of require you to picture it in your own head rather than just seeing it on the television. Who's that? 3D picture, yeah. Love those old monster movies. I am a person out of time. I should have been born back then. Ah, do you know who that is? You know the creature from the Black Lagoon. Who is that, sir? Space Patrol. Space Patrol. A show that kind of came and went back in the 50s. Inspiration for Star Trek. That's an FT991A. That is an amateur radio. I've got an extra class amateur radio license I kind of tinker with on occasion.
What's your call sign?
K4 X-Ray India Oscar.
Very good.
What, are you a ham?
First class.
Ex-
I got broadcasting radio and television.
extra class? What's your call sign?
I haven't used it in 5 years. I can't remember. It was W4T something one time.
W4T something. That's sitting on my shelf unused at the moment. I found that after all those hoops I jumped through, I prefer to talk local, and I use that one. That's a Kenwood something. You think I would know? That's the wheelchair. That was my home until just recently, for the past 5 or 6 years. And it's only been recently that I've gotten back up on my feet again. A neurological muscle weakness exasperated by all of that hard traveling that I did. So, if I fall, someone come and pick me up. We'll start with the history of autism, but before we do that, whose is this? Kathy? Where'd she go? Your husband, right? It's his? Any excuse to play, guys. And I've got an audience here. When I started doing this at conferences, they started offering me more money. Like, what have I gotten myself into? I don't know how this is going to sound with the webcast right here next to the microphone. A little concerned about that.
I'm going to make it sound good.
What, are you that good? Can you do that?
That's what that microphone right here is for. I can shotgun the guitar.
Do I look like an old gray-haired folk singer, guys?
You look like Johnny Cash to me.
Can't be a folk singer without one of these. I'm experiencing technical difficulties. Guitar's bumping the thingy here. I'm experiencing technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen.
How's that?
certainty. I want to be in the warm hold of your love and mine. To feel you all around me and to take your hand along the sand. But I may try. When the sound pales the sky, I want to hide a while there behind your smile. And everywhere I look, your eyes I find. For me to love you now would be the sweetest thing. 'Twould make me sing. I'll try and catch the wind. Has hung the leaves with tears. I want you near to kill my fears. Help me to leave all my blues behind. For standing in your heart is where I want to be and where I long to be. But I may as well try and catch the wind. But I may as well try and catch the wind. I just like to play. Sing for the sake of the song. When I was in the institution, I learned how to play, and there's really nothing to do there. So I picked up a guitar one day, I was kind of strumming, and someone walked up and said, "Hey, you want to learn how to play that?" And I thought, "Sure." And so they kind of signed me up with this music therapist they had on staff. And back then, I wasn't really all that social and had a little musical savant ability, so I kind of got better than her faster than I thought I would. And, for some reason, and they haven't figured this out yet, as people with autism become more social, they lose that. They lose those savant abilities, and they're kind of gone. And you might be able sometimes to hear some echoes of it in the harmonica there, but I can't play near as well as I used to. History of autism. Identified in 1943 by Leo Kanner. A lot of people mispronounce it. Kanner's name is Kanner, it's German. Hans Asperger in 1944 then published a paper identifying autism. He didn't call it that. What I have heard, and I haven't verified this, So at least for the moment, take it with a grain of salt or look it up yourself if you're interested. Apparently, Asperger did not name it Asperger's syndrome. Apparently, it was Lorna Wing that coined that term. And then in 47, Bettelheim's refrigerator mother theory, which caused all kinds of problems, until 1965, when Bernie Rimland published his book on infantile autism, suggesting that rather than autism being caused by bad parenting, it was an inherent neurological disorder, which is a little more accurate, and it took the pressure off parents who weren't responsible anyway. Also in 65, by Bernie and Ruth Sullivan and a few others, the Autism Society of America was created, and I was born. And then infantile autism becomes a diagnosis in the DSM-3. The criteria was much more stringent at that time. It was a little more difficult to be diagnosed. You had to be a little more severe, and that's the criteria that I was diagnosed under. Oh, and that reminds me, I have to tell you guys the story. Okay, so here's the story. People ask me, and I don't often talk about this. Usually what has to happen is people have to pay me enough, or someone has to ask me about this during the Q&A or prior or something, and I won't tell you which one that was, but one of those is making me tell you this story. A lot of people ask me, if you were able to be diagnosed under the DSM-3 criteria, then how are you doing so well now? What happened? Look, she's nodding her head. Were you wondering that?
No, but I was working at that time.
What were you doing?
I was a speech path, and I had most of my folks that later.
Were they the kids rocking in the corner?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep.
That was me. Little miracle in 83. After those 3 years in that place, there was what I kind of worked my way out of there against the advice of the doctors. There was a law in the books, at least in the state of Ohio. I'm not sure if it was a federal law or not. It might have been a state law that said if you want to keep your health insurance at the age that I was, which I think was like 17, 18 years old, then you had to be working or in college full time, and they defined full time as 12 or more credit hours. So what happened was I moved to this little house where my aunt and uncle were living in Urbana, Illinois, and I attended this tiny little community college there called Parkland. Some of you may have heard of it. And I was taking computer science courses, and I was taking the 12 credit hours because my father, being in the insurance business like he was very keen on all of his kids having health insurance. So taking some guy who's been in a place like that for 3 years, pulling him out and putting him 12 hours in college is a recipe for failure. To go directly from one to the other is not going to work. I did pass one of the classes, which by coincidence happened to be the only one I was taking that was not transferable. So that didn't quite work out, but something else did happen there. Before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about something else. It was actually kind of three things that brought me out of it. The other two happened earlier in life. One of them was the comics, which I already had up there. You know, a lot of whatever morals and values or ethics or character and integrity I may or may not have came from these three things. And one of them was the examples set by the heroes of the Bronze Age of comics. Another one was my mother's love for Irish folk music. My mother was very proud of her Irish heritage. And instead of having what everyone else had on their platter spinning at that time, the Carpenters, Captain and Tennille and Stones and Beatles or whatever else, she had the Rovers and the Dubliners and the Bards and Clancy and Macomb, a whole heck of a lot of Clancy and Macomb. And that kind of shaped me too, because I would be like doing that thing, rocking in the corner in the living room while my mother was sitting in her chair knitting, listening to this music, and that was reaching me when nothing else would. And the third thing happened when I was at the college. I was leaving my class one day, and I was leaving the class, and I was walking down the hallway to go to another class. And as I'm walking down the hallway, guys, here comes this girl coming the other direction. She had a class there. She was going over here. And as she gets closer, I'm noticing the sheer beauty of this person. Everything about her just exuded beauty. And she's getting closer and closer, and I'm just seeing this person is more and more beautiful. And she walks right by me, doesn't even notice I'm there. And I had this thought as I'm walking by, using that word, which I never really used before, and I didn't know how much I would use it later. I thought, who was that girl? She looks like a princess. And during the rest of the couple of seconds I had to walk to the door, I kind of mourned the loss of not knowing her, thinking, she's out of my league. That girl can have anyone she wants, and she is not going to be interested in me. And then I just kind of put her out of my mind and went on with my life. A couple of weeks later, it was a Friday, and I had just finished all of the classes for the day, and I was feeling kind of bored, and I didn't really know what to do. And how appropriate that I am telling the story of the church sanctuary. I looked up at this bulletin board they had on the wall, and I saw this little notice for a Bible study that was about to happen in the next few minutes. And I really wasn't all that much into that at the time. And but you know, there was nothing else to do. So I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll go to this. Now, I can't tell you what was said or what we were studying or what book or verses or anything. That's all out of my mind because of what happened next. I can tell you that I remember when it was over, the other people who were at my table kind of got up and left. And I was sitting there with my nose in the Bible, looking over these scriptures they were just talking about. Again, I can't tell you what they were. Kind of pondering what was said, trying to figure out if I agreed with it or not. And I heard this voice. It was melodic, bird song, beautiful. And it's just one word, hello. I looked up, and there she was, sitting right in front of me. And I responded to her the only way I could. I said, hello, princess. And we kind of got to know each other, and what she did was something all of those doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists throughout my whole entire previous life were not able to do. She kind of gently came into my world and quietly pulled me out into this one. And I'm thankful for that. Most of the time, I can give you an example of the music. This is a song about a guy in Scotland. And he's done his work for the day. He's put in his hours, and he's got this little rowboat, and he's rowing across the Loch Tay, and he's trying to get home. And as he's rowing, he's thinking about the woman he loves, and he's feeling a little sad, a little upset because she's just told him that she, for whatever reason, doesn't feel the same way about him. This song is translated from the Gaelic, all except for one word, Ní an Rú. It's because there is no English translation for it. But if we were going to try, and I think this tells us something about the guy on the loch, which is why I'm telling you, if we were to try to translate it, the closest we would be able to come in English would be beautiful red-headed woman. I've done my work of day, and I row my boat away down the waters of Loch Tay as the evening light is fading, and I gaze upon Ben Lors, where the after-glory glows. I think on two bright eyes and the melting mouth below. She's my beauteous Nian, my joy and sorrow too. And if she proved untrue, well, I cannot live without her. My heart is torn to toe, and I would give the world to know why she means to let me go. As I sing, I roll. Ní an Rú, your lovely hair has more glamour, I declare, and the tresses that you wear between Colleen and Aberfeldy, be they lint white round gold, be they blacker than the snow, they are so much more to me than the melting flake of snow. And her eyes are like the gleam of sunlight upon the stream, and songs of fairies sing, sound like songs she sings at milking. My heart is full of woe, for last night she bade me go, and tears begin to flow. As I sing, I roll. Her eyes, they are like the gleam of sunlight upon the stream, and all songs she sings and milking. My heart is full of woe, for last night she bade me go, and the tears begin to flow as I sing, I read, I roll. Any excuse to play. Where did that come from? Did that just pop up during the song? Another technical difficulty. Temple stood up at an autism conference in 1981. As I understand it, she was basically telling one of the speakers that they were full of it. Some of you may have seen the movie where that happened. 1987, infantile autism was replaced by autistic disorder in the DSM-4. And then also in 87, Lovaas publishes a study on the effects of ABA. Were you doing any of that during the speech, or were you kind of leaving that to the ABA people?
I was leaving it to the ABA.
88, Rain Man. Yeah, definitely got to watch Wapner. 91, autism becomes a category for support services in public schools. That was a big step forward. And in 94, Asperger's syndrome was added to the DSM-4R. I remember there was a lot of conversation about this in the ASA boardroom at the time. Not everyone on the board was in favor of it. They seemed to be kind of split down the middle, and a little bit of polarization was going on there. 98, the published study in the Lancet, the MMR vaccine, and that's still a thing. It was later retracted, you'll remember, but and because of that study, it's going to be in the back of our minds probably forever. You know, do vaccines cause autism or not? 2000, thimerosal was removed from the vaccines, and yet the incidence of autism kept rising. And then in 2013, autism spectrum disorder kind of consolidates, and we lose infantile autism and Asperger's syndrome, and all of it kind of falls under the autism spectrum disorder with levels 1, 2, and 3. I think that has since changed again. And someone remind me to update this past 2013. So what is this? What is autism? According to the American Psychological Association, autism spectrum disorder refers to a neurodevelopment disorder that is characterized by difficulties with the obvious here: social communication, social interaction, and restrictive and repetitive patterns and behaviors, interests, and activities. Why is that in blue? Because the next definition from the American Psychiatric Association, also in blue, autism spectrum disorder is a fundamental condition involving persistent challenges with social communication, restricted interest, and repetitive behavior. While autism is considered a lifelong disorder, the degree of impairment in functioning because of these challenges varies between individuals, okay, which means the higher functioning and the lower functioning. So myself and Dina and Becca, I think it was Becca, wasn't it? we got together. What I was putting this slide thing together to do it when I was updating it at one point. I put those two definitions in. We thought we would try to come up with a one-sentence definition of something that cannot possibly be described in one sentence. And together, this was the best we could do. Autism spectrum disorder is a complex neurobehavioral difference, notice that, politically correct, difference that affects language and motor development, social interactions, and sensory processing throughout the lifespan. What none of these definitions tell you is technically autism doesn't actually exist. There is no way to prove it. All we have is this collection of behaviors and symptoms that we, in our own minds, have put together, and when we see them together, we call it autism. Now, there have been people who have been working on a definitive test. People have been working on blood tests and urine tests, and I've heard in some cases that they've gotten up to 80% accuracy. And that was some years ago, and I haven't heard anything about them since then. But to my knowledge, there is still no way to definitely test for this. The current DSM-5-TR diagnostic criteria, persistent, these are the behaviors that we have decided equals this thing called autism, which, because we have labeled it, that means that we can say, okay, let's give this person some help, let's give them some support, let's give them some services, and see if we can't do something to help them on their way a little bit. That would be the deficits in social communication and interaction across multiple contexts, manifested by all of the following currently or by history. That by history has caused all kinds of problems lately, because now it's kind of opened up the doors to people just kind of diagnosing themselves and speaking for everyone else who has it, which can be a problem. Deficits in social emotional reciprocity. See, all of this you guys know. Nonverbal communication behaviors used for social interaction. Marge was just telling me earlier today, she was talking to me about how communication is behavior. And you were doing speech. Do you agree with that? Do you think when these kids are acting up, do you agree with Marge that when there is a behavior, because they are not able to communicate in a regular way, the behaviors are saying, hey, I'm trying to tell you something here.
Gain somebody's attention, protest. It's the inability to have a maybe more conventional technique that people can understand outside their family circle.
So you would agree with that then? Deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. This is something the princess had to teach me, and I'm glad she did, because I didn't have a clue. And it's just the kind of thing that comes naturally to others, but because of like just a wire or two crossed in the brain at some point early on, it's not the kind of thing that comes as naturally to the person with autism. They're just not made to naturally pick up on that the way everyone else is. Restricted, repetitive patterns, behaviors, interests, or activities. The interest, that would be the comics. Kathy, does your son have any repetitive movements or behaviors?
My youngest does this.
stereotyped or repetitive motor movements, use of objects or speech. That's kind of what we were talking about. Insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routines or ritualized patterns of verbal or nonverbal behavior. I can give you guys a real world example of this that just happened to me coming here. And Kathy can tell you, you know what I'm going to say, don't you? The last time I flew was many years ago. I used to come out to these places all the time whenever someone would invite me and say, hey, we'd like you to come and speak for our group. Would you consider doing that? You know, we'll give you a ticket. We'll send you a ticket. You know, come on, fly on out here and talk to us. I'm like, sure. And so that's what would happen. They would send me an actual ticket, a plane ticket in the mail, and I would pack and I would go to the airport and I would go up to the counter and I would hand them the ticket and then I would go through the process. I had no idea how much the airlines had changed. That's not, now it's all this thing on your phone and little barcodes and you pay extra to check your baggage and you pay extra to get a seat and I was having a little bit of a problem with that. I was experiencing a little bit of culture shock coming out here trying to adjust and adapt to that because I was used to the way that I had done it before. And I will be the first to admit, in my crankiness, my old age, I don't like change. Highly restricted, fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus. I could tell you any bloody thing about any bloody superhero you could ever possibly want to know. My mind is full of absolutely useless superhero trivia, down to the mundane. The big ones like Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, down to the ones that nobody knows about, like Our Man and Dr. Fate and Wildcat. Hyper or hypo reactivity to sensory input or unusual interest in sensory aspects of the environment. Kathy, can you give an example of that? Oh, there's got to be something. What?
He can't stand the light. Like when he walks into the light.
Oh, light sensitivity. Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's common. I've got sunglasses in there, kind of go over your glasses and cover everything. Auditory hypersensitivities are also common. You'll see them covering their ears a lot. You might be able to see these thingies in my ears. They've been specially programmed to compensate for that, and they work most of the time. Symptoms must be present in early developmental period. They may not fully manifest until social demands exceed capacities or may be masked by learned strategies in later life. This is also causing problems. This is another one of the things that is causing the self-diagnosis, because these people are looking back on their lives and saying, hey, that's me. Used to be under the old criteria that the symptoms had to be they had to be noticeable, I think, by was it 36 months, I think, was it 36 months of age? So usually it was the parents taking the kids in, and the doctors would interview the parents and other people and look the kids over and say yes or no. But the symptoms had to be there within the first 36 months, or it didn't count. Now, with that little rider on it, that may not be true. Symptoms cause clinically significant impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of current functioning. This is also a problem because here you've got the question, where do you draw the line between autism and just a little bit of quirkiness? And the answer to that is going to depend on who you ask. Challenges are not better explained by intellectual disability or global developmental delay. In other words, if there is some other diagnosis which could explain it. So what we've got here is a little circle. These social, emotional, communication challenges, the repetitive patterns of behavior, interest in activities, and then the sensory processing disorder aspect, which we're going to get into. Causes, genetics and environment. They're doing some very interesting research with genetics right now. There's a current emphasis on genetics because if you have one child with autism, it increases the chances that you are going to have another. And that kind of implies a generic etiology. But then there's also kind of the environmental factors, which might go back to the refrigerator mother or might be some other things. And they're thinking that right now, what they're thinking is sort of a combination, genetic predisposition for some certain environmental factors, bullied at school or something like that. As far as genetics, we have the twin studies. With identical twins, they have found that an 80% chance of both having autism spectrum disorder. That does not match my experience in my travels. I'm not sure where I would put the percentage, but in the identical twins that I have met, it's nowhere near 80%. In fact, if anything, it would be the opposite. I think, looking back, that over half of them that I met, one had autism and one didn't. And with the fraternal twins, it was just a 10%. That does pretty much match my experience. So that suggests a strong genetic component, but not 100%, which is where the environmental factor comes in. There's no identified set of genes associated with a high risk yet. They're working on it. And of course, as you can see, approximately 100 genes related to the risk have been identified for small groups. Blah, blah, blah. Genetic variations cause changes in brain structure and chemistry. They have MRI'd me and found little anomalies in there. This would answer a whole bunch of questions if they were able to figure it out, the multiple pathways. If we could find the multiple pathways to autism spectrum disorder, we could differentiate them and call each one a different thing. And if we did that, we could then assign the appropriate interventions to each one and give each one of them the help that they needed. But I think that's going to be down the road a little bit. You can see the difference there between the Asperger's brain and the normal brain. And I'm not sure why they called it an Asperger's brain, because I don't think she was Asperger's. The one on the left is Temple, and the one on the right is some anonymous neurotypical individual person, and you can see the difference there. The other temples is much more fired up. As far as the environment goes, you got prenatal environmental factors. I don't know. Some people say smoking or certain drugs or something like that could cause it. Exposure to substances and medications, first trimester, things like that. Research has shown an association between ASD and neonatal infection. Some basic facts, which everyone in this room, I'm sure you already know: neurological-based developmental disability, meaning it is not psychological, it's not refrigerated mothers. The current incidence just keeps changing. It keeps getting, that last number keeps getting smaller. The current incidence released not long ago is 1 in 36. And when those 1 in 36 get older and grow into adults, we're going to have a problem figuring out what to do with them. Used to be 4 times more common in boys than girls. Now they're saying it's 5 times. However, there is a debate about this because there are some people, you're nodding your head, you know what I'm about to say. There are some people saying that autism in girls is not really understood yet, and that girls are better at masking it than boys are. So you don't spot it in girls as easily. The cognitive abilities range from the gifted to the severely impaired, the higher and the lower functioning. There is no known psychological cause, and 25 to 30% have seizures, including me. 20% have savant skills, which I did, but I don't anymore. And the lifespan is currently thought to be 16 years shorter than average, usually by way of self-infliction. This is my favorite part of the talk. I love talking about this. What is sensory processing? That would be the ability to synthesize, organize, and process incoming sensory information received from the body and the environment to produce purposeful, goal-directed responses. What does that mean? What that means is, in English, what's happening is you are sensing what is happening around you. It's coming in through your eyes, through your ears, through your sense of touch, and you are interpreting that somewhere in the brain in such a way as to give you an accurate picture or representation of what is going on around you. For instance, Kathy was talking earlier about how it was getting warmer outside as we were going through the day. She knew that because she noticed her senses told her that the temperature was going up. And she was able to accurately discern that because her sensory processing was working correctly. Sensory processing disorder, on the other hand, means an ineffective neurological processing of the information received through the senses, causing problems with learning, development, and behavior. What that means is the information that is coming in, rather than being processed correctly, is being scrambled and jumbled somewhere either on the way to the brain or within the brain itself, creating a distortion of what really is. And if what you are perceiving is a distortion of reality, then it's no wonder really that you're sitting there rocking in the corner, because the world really doesn't make any sense to you at all. A little bit about sensory differences. We talked about the auditory, the hypersensitivity to sound. We already covered that. Back in the early 90s, I think, there was this thing, there was this, I don't know, I guess I guess you would call it, I'm thinking treatment, I'm not sure that's the right word, auditory training. You guys remember when that was a thing way back? How long you been doing this? Do you remember the auditory training?
And actually was living in Alaska then when there was people with lots of money.
Well, it cost a lot of money.
$10,000. It hurt my heart to watch people, parents pay $10,000.
They were paying $10,000?
Yes.
Okay, when I was working with what's her name, we were charged, she was charging $2.
Yeah, well, Alaska, you got to travel and you got to pay people more to get there, whatever.
Right. So they had this little gizmo, you put on these headphones, and there was this little gizmo with it looked like one of the spaceships out of Space Patrol earlier. Think 1950s Starship, Buck Rogers kind of thing. It looked a little bit like that. All kinds of knobs and lights and everything. And you kind of adjusted it according to an audiogram that you had taken from the individual, and you tried to retrain the ears to hear correctly. Now, this was based on the theory, which I think is the next slide. No, it's not. Which is based on the theory that the auditory hypersensitivities of individuals with autism was caused by, do you remember? A lack of balance in the sensitivity of the cochlea of the ear. Inside the cochlea, there's these little hair cells, and the hair cells respond to different frequencies of sound. And the theory was that some of the cells were more sensitive than others. And the reason they thought this, of course, was because there were kids who were having problems with things like the hum of fluorescent lights that none of the rest of us heard. So they developed this theory based on that, and they kind of created this little gizmo that was designed to stimulate certain cochlea while relaxing others, which was supposed to try to bring all of them back into balance, right? And this little thing, which I think it lasted, 10 days or something like that. You would wear these headphones for a certain amount of time, twice a day, and while you had them on, the audiologist or whatever would tinker with this machine and feed these sounds into your ears, which was going to fix your ears. And then at the end of the 10 days, you were just done. And in theory, that was it. You were no longer hypersensitive to sounds. Now, I was one of the first in this country to get that done. And yes, they charged others for it, but because I'm me, they gave it to me for free. And my experience with this was that it did kind of work, and I noticed a difference for a few months. And 3 or 4 months later, my parents went out of town. They were living in Ohio, and I was living, down the street a ways. And Mom and Dad had this little cabin up in the mountains in Tennessee that they would go to every now and again. They went to visit that. They told me to come move in, take care of the dog and stuff while they were gone, which I did. And I was running the dishes in the dishwasher, you see, in the kitchen. And they were done, and I was taking the dishes out of the dishwasher. I was putting them back in the cabinet. I reached down to the bottom rack, and there were 2 plates. They were kind of next to each other, and I reached my fingers down, and I grabbed them like this, and I pulled them up, and the bottom of the plates clanked together, clink, and it all came back just like it was before with that one sound, clink. So in the end, it didn't work for me. Interoception, difficulty interpreting physiological signals. Are you hot? Are you cold? Are you in pain? Are you not? You got to go potty? No. What's going on with you? Sometimes your body doesn't tell you, or more likely, for whatever reason, you're just not able to properly interpret what it's telling you. And then with the olfactory hypersensitivity to sense, this has kind of become a big thing at conferences. They're asking people not to wear perfume and things. Proprioception, awareness of the body in space, and differences in need for movement and sensation. Oh, look, there it is again. And look, there he is. Kathy, go tell him. I've got a proprioception. I'm thinking I've got a proprioception story, but I can't remember it. Tactile, a hyper or hypersensitivity to touch, strong preferences or dislike for specific tactile input. Traditionally, stereotypically, what you have in the case of autism is tactile defensiveness, right? I keep turning to you because you've been doing this for so long. Tactile defensiveness, where the kids just don't like to be hugged. And they've been saying for years that one of the red flags for autism in infancy is infancy, is that the right word? Infancy is a refusal to latch on and do the breastfeeding. And then of course the mother feels guilty because she feels like for whatever reason she's not doing it right, which is not the case at all. But there's also that small subsection which is the opposite, which kind of more like tactile cravings, where you like being hugged and where you want that. And unfortunately, that's where I am, which is a lot cuter when you're younger and you can get away with it a lot more than you can when you're my age. The tactile defensiveness ones, they're the lucky ones, because what's happening with them, come here, Kathy, come here. What's happening with them is when you reach out to them, when you touch them, they're feeling pain from that. Put your hand up like this. See? But if I do this, that's when I don't, and when I let go, that's when I do. So I'm constantly feeling this low intensity tactile pain because I'm not getting this. They are theorizing that what happened was when I was born, you know how you're wrapped in the blanket and you adapt to the outside? They're thinking that adapting never happened with me. Thank you for helping me with that demonstration. Vestibular, gravitational insecurity. I have been experiencing a lot more of this lately, fresh out of the wheelchair. I can walk on this even ground, but not all ground is even. If you're walking along grass, sometimes there's little bumps and hills and valleys on the ground, and I've kind of been having a problem with that, getting a little wobbly and feeling a little gravitational insecurity with that. Seeks out or avoids movement. That would be things like the swing or the jungle gym or whatever. Some kids, they seem to be hyper. Sometimes that might be a case of vestibular seeking. Visual, hypersensitive to visual input, color, lights, glare, patterns, contrast, movement. There was a conference I went to somewhere. I think it might have been that one we were talking about in Ontario in '93. We were staying in this hotel, and this carpet that they had at the hotel, it was just horrible because when you look down at it, it moved. Guys ever seen that? The carpet that you look, she's nodding. You guys know what I mean? That carpet that's just so garish, it's got these horrible patterns that when you look at them, they just seem to move and shimmer back and forth, you know? That got a lot of discussion at that conference. Donna Williams talked a lot about how her eyes perceive things as cloud shapes and shadow. And she thought she was the only one. She's not. That's the way I see it too. I've got some prisms in these glasses. They're pretty strong and they kind of help pull the image together. There was a guy right after Oprah. In fact, it was the day after Oprah aired. And he was a reporter for the local paper in Bedford, Virginia, where I was living at the time. It's a small town between Lynchburg and Roanoke. And he wanted to interview me because I was this local guy made big, right, on Oprah. And I think I mentioned something about visual sensitivities during that piece, and he asked me about it. He said, "What do you see when you look out?" I said, "Well, you know, things are kind of fragmented. It's like seeing the world in Picasso vision." And I just said that in passing, and the next day there's this great big headline on the front page with a picture of me that looks like I'm this dead guy. And in great big words it says, "Man sees life in Picasso vision." And, Brenda put that on. She insisted on it. I'm like, "Brenda, let me just write it down." She says, "You can't do that." I'm like, "Why?" She said, "Enter the 21st century. People are going to whip out their phone and scan it. And then you won't have to write it." Look, he's doing it. So all of that was, I don't know, I'm just trying to give you some idea of how this autism thing works.
It works.
The QR code.
The QR code does work.
It does work, yes. Yes, I tried it. And look, he's doing it too. Getting a little deeper into this, because all of that is just like superficial information that most people know. Does anyone have any questions?
I do. I have several, of course. Hypersensitivity. I have so many friends that have that problem.
Which one?
The hands, like you're saying. I mean, literally, they want their hands held just really, really, really tight. And their feet.
Oh,
their back,
the pressure.
I mean, almost to the point, and they grab others and pull on their legs.
Right.
And they can't help it. You can tell they can't help it.
Well, the pressure thing is not tactile. The pressure thing is proprioceptive, which thank you for that, because now I remember the proprioceptive story. Temple Grandin, her squeeze machine. One day, I had the great pleasure of getting into Temple's own personal squeeze machine. And she was standing right there, and I got down on my hands and knees, and I got into this thing, and there's this little thing that you pull, and these things come up, and they kind of clamp on you, and they squeeze you. Guys might remember this. And so I'm down there, and I pull this thing, and clump, they just come up on me. Temple's standing like off to the side here, and she looks down at me and she says, "Well, what do you think?" in her Temple voice. And I looked up at her and I went, "Ooh." And she was not happy with me. But the pressure thing is not tactile, it's proprioceptive. That's caused by an underdevelopment of the proprioceptive cells.
But when this hug machine can't be everywhere.
The hug machine stimulates the underdeveloped proprioceptive cells, which not only removes the pain, but actually allows you to know where you are in relation to everything around you.
And I do think helps some of our people calm in situations.
Yes.
They're busy, like classrooms.
Right.
But how do you make that? What can we do?
Could it be like a compression vest?
Well, most of my people is
It's
here.
just hands.
I
It
see it
is-
more here lately. I
They make
guess-
weighted gloves as well.
Are you saying that what she is saying
That's a
isn't
different need, almost, for some of my people. They've come past that.
you're
and
talking
it's-
about the people that want the squeezing but by someone else
Right.
with the
Or-
tactile contact.
Or they will grab you into the point that you'll have bruises. And they don't.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a problem. I think I think the way to deal with that, the thought that comes to mind about the way to deal with that is to, I don't think it's wrong that they're asking for it because I believe it's a genuine need. I don't believe it's anything weird or
not a
sexual
behavior.
or
I think
anything
it's
like
back to
that.
behavior.
I think it is it is a behavior saying, hey, I've got some problems, I'm in pain here, you can take this away, will you do this for me? And I think it's a legitimate need. I don't think it's wrong to meet that need. However, there are appropriate ways to do that as opposed to what you were saying about grabbing the arms or the legs or something like that. And I think what you do in that case is you say, you know what, I can do this for you, but kind of approach me this way about it.
Sharon, something that I've done with one of my students is she squeezes, I'm sure you know her, but she squeezes and she squeezes very hard and she has functional language skills, so we have taught her to ask for them before
Right.
receiving it because she needs that type of input.
Right.
And that's because I think that it's not something that she can control, and I think that it's legitimate that she's asking for it, but teaching her to ask for
Right.
it is more
Self-advocacy,
socially
yeah.
appropriate.
Right.
And that's,
And then I think that whole intensity of it varies.
yeah.
What is hurtful to me may not be hurtful to you, so to speak, that kind of grabbing, especially.
Right, if I went back over to her and squeezed her hand, that would be hurtful to her.
Right.
But it would not.
Right.
It would not be to me.
Right.
There you've got a problem because that's also a genuine need, but that's not a need that can be met without hurting the other, without hurting the other individual. And where do you find the balance between where your needs end and the other person's needs not to be hurt begin? And those are difficult questions.
It's a tough call.
Yeah. And the answer to who you are. Because everyone's going to feel different about it.
So, one of the things you said was 1 in 36 people have this diagnosis. And then you said later on that when these folks grow up, there's going to be potential issues. Having folks in the family like that, they're going to stay part of the family until the parents expire. And then what happens? What do you feel is going to be the next step for this folks?
That's what everyone's asking. Okay, if you guys on the web didn't hear that, he was talking about the 1 in 36, and when they grow up and the parents expire, what's going to happen. And the one question that I have been asked in my travels more than any other is, what is going to happen to my child after I die? And I don't have an answer for them. There are things that you can do to prepare for that. There are accounts and trusts and powers of attorney and things like that, all kinds of things that you can do to get ready for that to the extent that you can. When those 1 in 36 grow up, we are going to be facing a 1 in 36 problem of what do we do with these people?
Right,
Because what happened? Because it's not their fault.
Right.
And how do we deal with that? And that's not something that we as a society are looking at, and it's something that we should be looking at, because that time is coming, and it's coming sooner than we think. Because we're running out of time. You know, if you take the ones born now, you know, that's going to give us 20, 30 some years. The problem is, as far as everyone is concerned, people with autism only live to 21, because as soon as you reach 22, all the services end and you don't exist anymore. You fall off the face of the earth. And that needs to change. But you know, where do we find the money for that?
I saw, and you may be in the group too, but I saw someone post that 1 in 36, if 1 in 36 children was being kidnapped, they would declare a state of emergency.
Right.
They're not. So, you know, the number is alarming. What are people doing? Why are they not doing something? That's the question.
That I think I can answer. That I think I know. I think one of the things that we can do to bring more attention to it, and to at least get people thinking about it, if not doing something, is bring the more severely affected out into society where people can see that they exist. Because they're kind of hidden away in the basements and the attics, and nobody wants to acknowledge that they are there. And at this point, that's easy to do because nobody sees them. The parents don't bring them out because of the behaviors. They need to be bringing them out anyway, so that we can see these people do exist, and yes, this is a problem, and yes, we need to do something about it. Right.
It's not safe.
Right.
You know, you go to a park that's near a road. There's no fence. It's a danger to take somebody who runs.
Take them to the state legislature. Take them to the Senate and the.
You're absolutely right.
And say, hey, this is my child. And there's a heck of a lot more like him in this state. He's not the only one. Or a group of you take your kids to the legislature. Or if 50 of you did, they went in singing a bar of Alice's restaurant, they'd think it's some kind of movement. Friends, that's exactly what it is. Make it real. Put faces on it. Because right now there isn't any. It's just like this maybe there's these kids out there, but I don't really know because I never see them.
I have an easier question.
I like that.
Okay, so little grandson who's 6 sits there and assessing with a little tablet, and he can, maneuver all over, finds great little videos to watch. But while he's watching them, if somebody else in the room starts speaking or something like that, all of a sudden he starts doing the hypersensitivity thing. He wants them to shut up because it's kind of interfering with his little process going on there. We don't know whether it's appropriate for us to tell you, hey, from a socialization standpoint, you need to respect others while you're playing on your thing, or if we need to cater more to his desire.
I'm having some flashbacks as you say that to being a little grouchy at my parents talking while I was watching Doctor Who when I was younger. The Tom Baker episodes when they were first broadcast in the early 80s, I think, on PBS. I'm sure it was something similar. And looking back on that, the obvious answer was for me to go someplace a little more private to watch the videos if I didn't want to be interrupted. You know, I could go into the bedroom or something like that so mom and dad could talk in the kitchen, right? And that would solve both problems. I could watch a show and they could have a conversation.
You know, we feel sort of guilty about, you know, trying to shut it down with that piece, but at the same time, like you said, it's probably better to look for a compromise.
Well, actually, now that I think about it, you know, things are a little different now. You couldn't pause the doctor back then. I mean, if he was going to hand someone a jelly baby, would you like a jelly baby? That was going to happen, you know, when mom and dad said hello. Now it doesn't have to, because you can just hit pause and say, well, yeah, mom, what do you want? And then go back to it later. Having a problem with that would just be an indication of what would it be? Immediate gratification, which our society is all about. That's why we have those videos, why we don't have to wait for them, and we can just pop in the DVD of Doctor Who now anytime we want to, rather than wait for it to come on the television, you know, because we're a society that requires immediate gratification. But now, these days, I could just hit pause. Kids can do that. They may not want to. I'm not sure that it's wrong to teach them that it's okay to do that, even if they don't want to. My father told me, I don't know how many times growing up, he said, son, we all have to do things we don't want to do. And that doesn't change just because you have a diagnosis.
One of my favorite things that I have to say is that somebody has to be the bad guy, and it's usually me. I'm a self-contained special ed teacher, so it's usually me that's the bad guy, but there's always someone else out there that is going to be harder on the individual with the diagnosis. If you come at it from a loving standpoint and you lovingly shape and mold those behaviors as best you can, it will make it easier in those times of difficulty as he gets older and dealing with other people that are more difficult and don't understand.
Yeah. Some of us are bad.
I was out doing that auditory training in some town somewhere way back when, and the lady, the audiologist, she was driving me to the airport so I could fly back home because we had just finished it, and she was walking me to the counter. I'm not sure why she was doing that. One of the employees just passed by, and she said in passing, this is a story in this book. It's one of the stories I hear the most comments on. She said in passing, he has autism, keep an eye on him. She had no idea what that was going to explode into. And so I didn't either. And I got on the plane and I'm flying into Atlanta. And the reason I'm thinking of this is because when I'm going home, when I leave here Tuesday, I'm going to be going home by way of Atlanta. And the flight attendants seem to be a little nicer to me than they usually were. And I noticed this, and I did wonder about it, but I thought, well, maybe they're just having a good day. And the plane pulled into the gate, the B concourse, and people were going to get up and exercise caution when removing items from overhead bins, as items tend to shift during takeoff and landing. And there was this announcement come over. This flight attendant says, people, we would like to ask you to remain in your seats for a moment, if you would. We will tell you when it is safe for you to get up and move about the cabin. And everyone's kind of looking at each other, right? Saying, well, what's all this about? This isn't how it's supposed to work. Is something going on? And then these two guys in the black suits and the sunglasses, very Men in Black, come onto the plane and they stop in my row. And they said, are you Thomas? And I said, yes. Come with us, please. Very official, very cold, unemotional. Come with us, please. So I'm thinking, oh no, what did I do? Did I do something to piss off the airlines, right? So I'm escorted out, and they take me out to the gate B12. And there's this guy that's empty. The gate is empty, except for this guy that's behind the little counter at the gate. And the three of us walk off the plane. And one of the guys says, he has autism, don't let him out of your sight. And he shoves me right into one of the seats, just pushes me right in, so that I fall, and then, don't you move from that spot. And then both of them take off. And the guy behind the counter gives me this kind of nasty, kind of dirty look. Like, great, now I got to keep an eye on this guy. Something else for me to do. And I'm sitting there with this like hour and a half, 2 hour layover, and I don't want to be sitting in this chair the whole time. And I'm trying to think of how to get out of this. And just as I'm wondering, by this wonderful stroke of luck, this pretty girl approaches him from the other side, and he turns away from me to flirt with her for a moment. And so I'm thinking, now's my chance. And I got up out of the chair, and I just very slowly walked away around the corner and out of his sight. And then I'm thinking, okay, where do I go? Because he might come looking for me. And I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll go over to the C concourse. He'll never find me there. So I went over to the C concourse, and I found this little bar with this kind of dark corner in it. And it was next to the window, and I sat down at this table. I pulled out a little laptop, and I looked out the window, and it was dark and raining, and I thought, yeah, a rainy night in Georgia, it really does feel like it's raining all over the world. And I just stayed there kind of tapping away, and time went by, and I saw that my plane was about to board, and I didn't think anything of it. I should have. I had no idea what was going on outside that corner of the bar. Something was going on. And I kind of packed everything away, and I got up, and I'm thinking, well, I'll just go back to the B concourse and get on my plane like it was nothing. And as soon as I stepped out of the bar, all of these security guys, they're like surrounding me, right? And they're like making sure I don't get away from them or move anywhere. And this one guy, he whips out his walkie-talkie and he says, verbatim, these are his exact words, you don't forget something like this. He keyed his little button, his little microphone, and he said, yeah, this is Charlie Niner. Target has been located. I repeat, target has been located. And I found out later the entire security force of that airport was out looking for me. It wasn't just that guy, it was all of them. And Charlie Niner, poor fella, grabs me by the arm. Some of your kids might have liked that from what you were saying. And he yanks me back to the gate and shoves me down in the seat the way the other guy did, gave me a talking to. And then when I got back to Columbus, the whole process was repeated, except there was someone waiting for me, so the men in black just kind of handed me over to them. Got home, I called the lady and I told her about it. She said, oh, that was my fault. I told them you that the wrong way. I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll keep working for you if you promise never to do that again. And she promised, and I kept working for her, and she never did it again. And eventually the project ran its course, and I stopped doing that and went back to speaking at conferences. But see, what you had there was a misunderstanding. What you had there was like this big, huge misunderstanding of what autism is, because all of those security people were thinking, we have to find this guy for his safety and for the safety of the others at the airport, because he could be a danger to himself or others, which absolutely wasn't the case, because I was just sitting there minding my own business in the bar, typing away. I wasn't a threat to anybody. And unfortunately now, 30 years later, things are a little better, but we still have a long way to go.
Children who do elope, and because she had brought up the safety issue for bringing kids out into the public and stuff.
I don't have an answer. I kind of wish I did.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to say, oh well, that's easy. Here's what you do.
Yeah.
But I can't, because I don't have an answer for that. I think that. I think we need to bring them out. I'm just not sure how to do it. But it's something that we should be thinking about.
You can get a handicap placard so that you can park as close as you possibly can to the door wherever you go, so that you're not worried about having to run through the parking lot.
Right, which is no guarantee, but it might help.
Yes, it does help, especially like if you ever have to go to Patewood and that kind of thing, when you're having to park all the way, football field across from the entrance, that can be scary, especially with the traffic and everything. So it does help.
And see, we use the handcuff, what are they called? Yes.
Yeah,
security
where
bracelets.
the bracelet that goes
Yes.
from your wrist
Yes.
to his. Yeah.
Yes. But he's not going to be 6 forever.
Yeah.
And he's going to be faster than me one day. And
Right.
I'm not sure what I'm going to do.
You're not going to be able to keep up, or the
No.
bracelet's going to break.
Yep.
See, that's a problem. These cute little young kids are not going to stay cute little young kids forever. They're going to get older, and when that happens, what do we do?
I have a question. Have you met a lot of people that maybe use service dogs in that instance? I don't know how well that might work, but I don't know if that's used for that.
My child is terrible. Major sensory.
Right.
Because we looked into that.
Right.
And it's like 12,000.
Oh, they're unaffordable.
Yes.
But I was just wondering if that's something that maybe you
Jim Sinclair used to talk about that in the 90s. He was a big believer in the service dogs for kids with autism, and it does work for some, but not for others.
I just wonder because sometimes the kids can wander off, any kid really, but.
What are you suggesting? Training the dog to bark when that happens and saying, hey, pay attention, your kid's wandering away.
At least just follow them because like with one of my younger brothers, there's a label on my mom's stove that says, don't touch this, it's hot. Maybe a dog could, with children preventing them
Right.
doing the things that other kids might not do.
Yeah, a well-trained dog does help with that.
Well, the thing is, the dog would have to know what that is, and there's so many things that they might do that other kids wouldn't. How would you cover all of your bases?
Right, I would just simply, the dog would be with some like a stove or out of the road or like they're just.
Well, the road is a big issue. I've attended more than one funeral from a kid that ran out in the street, and that's the last thing they ever did. It does happen. And the thing is, guys, you can put all of the bloody locks and whatever other little measures all over your house that you want to, and if they want to get out, they're going to find a way to do it anyway. And the reason I know that is because I found a way to do it anyway. And I have heard countless stories from parents of other kids that have found a way to do it anyway. And I have come to the conclusion, and there may be people who disagree with me on this, and maybe even rightly so, but I'm thinking at this point that might not necessarily be the parents' fault if the kids get out. Which doesn't mean that the parents don't have a responsibility to keep their kids in the house and do everything they can to keep their kids in the house. What's going to happen in that case is the child is going to come up with some wildly insane creative way of getting out of the house that no normal rational person would ever begin to consider, and it will be effective, and they will get out of the house. It's happened, and are the parents to blame for that? I don't know. I know that it is their responsibility to keep their kids safe, but some of these things that they're coming up with, how could you even think that's a possibility and prepare for that ahead of time? All of these are issues that we as a society need to be thinking about, but we're not.
So I think this has been a really unique opportunity to hear from someone who has lived through all of that. A lot of times we just hear from people that's read books about it and studies about
Right.
it, but you've actually been there. You're that one person that can probably articulate what was going on during that time.
Those were Oprah's exact words. Thomas is one person who can articulate what it feels like.
So what I'd like to ask is, when you were in the corner and you were just kind of rocking, listening to your mom's Irish music, and she was knitting, what was your inner dialogue? What was going on there?
The Irish write these incredibly beautiful songs about two topics mostly, love and war. And when I was writing Soon Will Come the Light, somewhere in there I wrote that what I learned from that music was the joys of love and the horrors of war. And that's kind of what I thought about. I mean, that guy on the lock, that imagery of that song is just so well written and so powerful that it's like you're there and you can feel the guy's heartbreak, because this woman, this redheaded lady that he just loves, has said, hey, I'm sorry, I just don't feel the same way about you. Shot him right out of the saddle. And he's heartbroken over it. And, not everyone in this room is of the male persuasion, but if you are, you probably know how that feels because it's happened to all of us at one point in our lives. And the horrors of war, they were graphic about that too. You know, they wrote these songs about bullets flying by your head and being injured and people dying and blood flowing out into the sand. And they paint these horrible graphic pictures of the reality of the horrors of war. And it's fascinating that they write such great songs about these two polar opposite, diametrically opposed subjects, and they do them both well. And it's like they know both well. You know, there's that whole orange and green in Northern Ireland thing. You know, Ireland's had its problems with war, and they've also been known to love, so I guess they would know about it. What was going through my mind, I think, when I was listening to that is just that, the joys of love and the horrors of war, and what both of those might be like based on what I heard in the songs. And I think the combination of those two things kind of shaped my morals and my values and what I've grown up to believe in.
So you're sitting there and you're hearing all that, and your mom, she's knitting. How is she perceiving what you're getting?
Well, I'm not really sure. She's no longer with us, so I can't ask her. That would be a great question to ask her, though. She sang along to the love songs. I remember her doing that.
Were they the traditional Irish songs?
Oh yeah, go lassie go, and we'll all go together. You pluck wild mountain thyme all around the blooming heather, right? There was a lot of that, and she would sing along with it, and that's a good song too. I mean, here's this guy, and he so loves this woman that he builds her this castle, this tower on the mountain, and he takes all the flowers from the mountain and he puts them on there just to show the girl how much he loves her. One thing that I thought about that song, though, that I'm not sure a lot of people do, I felt bad about it in a way because I thought, well, what about other people on the mountain that might be wanting to enjoy the flowers? This guy plucked them all, and now they're gone. The flowers are gone from the mountain because they're all here for this. There's got to be other mountains are big places. There's got to be other people walking on the mountain. Don't they have a right to see the flowers too? And that's not a thought that a lot of people would have when they're listening to the song, but it's the kind of thing that I thought.
Communicating use her words as part of your communication system then?
What?
Your mom's words of the song.
How do you mean?
Well, I have friends that, for example, one loves Charlie Brown, anything about Charlie Brown. And I've come to see that she uses the words with a different communication intention.
Does she have the inflection?
Yep.
Does she talk like Charlie Brown? Charlie Brown?
No, she doesn't use that as much as just the script of Charlie Brown, maybe how she gets someone's attention versus then calls her.
Good grief, you blockhead.
Yeah, which doesn't go over well with her teacher, but
That's more of an echolalia kind of thing in a way, though.
It is in a way, yeah. But then, if you can't think about the communication intention of it, not the words of it. But she may be trying to get someone else's attention in the room.
How do you know if she's trying to get someone else's attention in the room or if she's just repeating something she heard on Charlie
She's directing it
Brown?
toward one person, and when that person comes over, then that, I've witnessed it. The teacher realizes, oh,
Well,
you're calling me.
then yes. Well, in that case, yes, it's obvious.
Yeah, but I mean, I know it's hard to put it all together.
I never did that.
Okay.
I mean,
know.
every word of every one of those songs is forever burned into my brain just because I heard all of them over and over again so many times. But I never like,
Did you see them in your thinking? Does that make sense?
I don't know. You know, Temple talks a lot about thinking in pictures.
Right.
And with the music, that's easy to do because you can picture the guy in the boat rowing across the loch. And you can picture this guy out picking flowers on the mountain and sticking them on this little building to show his love. You can do that. But, you know, if someone was like just having a regular conversation with you, I mean, it's a little more difficult for me to picture, for whatever reason, because it could go so many ways, the girl saying that to a teacher and the teacher responding. For some reason, for me personally, it's more difficult to do that with regular speech than it is with the music. And I'm not sure why. And you, I could give you another example. When I was playing some music, I was up on stage in Gahanna, Ohio. Where are we? We're in South Carolina, right? Yeah, I had to remember. In Gahanna, Ohio, the second Sundays of the month in Gahanna, Ohio, I get up and I play some songs. And there was this other guy there playing, and he got up and he played Puff the Magic Dragon. And I got to thinking about earlier on when I think I was a teenager. I heard that song, and you know, I was a little concerned. I mean, I thought we had a situation here. I mean, this was very serious. Okay, green scales fell like rain, and Puff, the last we heard from him, he sadly slipped into his cave, and that was the end. And yet, when you sing the chorus after that, Peter Yarrow is adamant that you do it in the present tense. So Puff sadly slipped into his cave, and yet he frolics, present tense. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, what happened after he sadly slipped into his cave that got him back out frolicking in the autumn mist? And these were the things that kept me awake at night. I'm thinking, how is that possible? Why didn't he tell us in the song how Puff got over this? Because maybe there's a lesson for all of us there. And I did write, I could play that, guys, if you want to hear it. I did eventually at some point realize that there was no answer, so I made up my own and kind of rewrote the song. If you want to hear that, I can play it. But that was my way of dealing with it. And that's not the kind of thing that I don't think I don't like the word neurotypical. I've never liked that a neurotypical person would think about when they hear the song. And it certainly wouldn't keep them awake at night. Because poor Puff, you know, yeah, he was in bad shape there for a while, but he's not real. And it doesn't really matter because of that. But I felt bad enough for him that I was kind of wondering how that all managed to work out. It's just kind of a different way of thinking. So what was there? Hello.
Hi. So I have a question. So college really prepares you for nothing. When you're teaching, you just figure out a lot along the way. Something that I've noticed, the primary population in my classroom is autism in all varying degrees.
And what kind of classroom do you have?
I'm a multi-categorical, self-contained classroom.
And
kindergarten through fifth grade.
What, all in the same class?
Yes.
Kindergarten for fifth grade?
Yeah. So I serve
That must be
all
a
of the
challenge.
disability categories. Yeah, it is. But something that I've noticed is that a lot of my students who are on the spectrum, they don't respond the same to temperature as the other children. They really lack, some of them are like freezing cold, and then some of them are burning hot. And so playing outside is extremely difficult for us. In the wintertime or like in the summertime, there's like peak times because they don't respond the same to temperature. They sweat so much and they're just like exhausted because of the heat, or they're so cold that they can't function, it seems.
Okay.
So what has been your experience with that and like the commonality of
There was something that happened just today. Were you the one that turned on the AC in the car, or was that Marge? Because one of the two of you, I'm not sure which one it was, turned on the AC and gave me a speech about it.
It was Marge. It was Marge because I freeze all the time.
Okay, well, Marge turned on the AC and gave me a speech about it, and it was I think it might have been in her Porsche. I rode in a Porsche today, guys. We were in her car, and she turned on the AC because it was starting to get a little warmer out. And she told me that she didn't want me to be cold, so she turned this on and said, I don't want you to be cold, so set this where you would like it. But where I would have liked it, I wonder if she's watching this. Margie, I hope you're not watching this. Where I would have liked it was to not have the AC on at all, because I wasn't feeling hot. And when the AC was blowing on me, that made me feel kind of uncomfortably cold. I didn't say anything to her about it. Maybe I should have. I don't know. You know, how far do you go with something like that? But that's sort of kind of what you're talking about. She was perceiving the temperature in the car in a way that's different than I was. And she felt like because she was hot, that I would be hot too, and her intentions were good. She was trying to, in her mind, make me more comfortable, which is a very thoughtful and considerate thing for her to do, but in doing that, she actually made me more uncomfortable than I had been before. It's just that she didn't realize that.
So is that common amongst individuals?
Yes, and it's going to, and the problem is it's common, but it's going to be different for all of them, because it's like you said, some of them are going to be hot, some are going to be shivering with cold, some of them are even going to be sweating, and all of them are going to be right there at the same temperature, reacting in a different way to it. And there is no way that you can fix that, because all of them are experiencing the temperature and how they're reacting to it differently. And none of them are wrong. You know, it's just how they're wired to feel it.
I was just wondering if it was something that I was just imagining. I have two paragraphs in my classroom, and we are like, they are all responding so differently. It's like we have to check the temperature, the wind chill.
Right, you're not imagining it. That is happening. It's just that I'm not sure there's anything you can do about it.
We take water bottles and jackets everywhere, so we just
Right, you can do things like that, but that in a sense causes its own problems too, which I'm sure you already know. But then, what else can you do? So I don't know, guys, have you like gotten anything out of this? Has this been helpful to you at all?
Similarities or maybe the result of mental illness and like schizophrenia or something and autism.
Autism is not a mental illness. Autism is a neurological disorder. It's a completely different thing. There was a time when they were considered sort of the same thing. And when they diagnosed me in 1980, they came this close to diagnosing me with schizophrenia. And at the last minute, they decided, no, we don't think he is. We think he's autistic, which is good for me because I think my life would have turned out a lot different with the other one.
My brother, when he was very young in his teens, was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And it was obvious that there was something that was different. And now, to me, he's more on the autism spectrum. So, but he's never had another alternate,
I
diagnosis.
miss my dad.
Would it make a difference now at this age if he did have another look at him?
Not really.
Because if it would, then I would say yes. But if not, then I would say, well, think about it. But I'm not sure it would make any difference.
Yeah, not now, but it might have been helpful back then.
Oh, absolutely, it would have been helpful back then.
It wouldn't have been quite as traumatic for the family.
Right. Well, they were considered like almost identical there for a time. And that's because nobody knew anything about it. It wasn't until the four of us started talking that people started figuring it out. And even though we've talked, and since then countless others have spoken up, there are still things that we don't understand about it and that we're still trying to figure out.
Behaviors, especially when you're younger, perhaps could be interpreted as being schizophrenic. Some of the, now, not so much now, but back then it was.
She's